Okay, so we're continuing the letters. We're up now to chaf sofit. Okay, so here. So the Mishnah Berurah says, ot kaf shuta. Again, they call a chaf sofit a chaf shuta because it doesn't curve inside; it just goes. It's like bashut. So he says, ragla aroch vegaga katzar k'dei shelo tidame leresh. Again, each letter we're concerned about it appearing like another letter. So really, a chaf sofit is similar to a reish. What distinguishes it from a reish is that it has a longer leg than the roof. So you have to make sure that proportionately the leg is longer than the width of the roof. Okay? ואף על פי כן לא יקצר גגה יותר מדי בכדי שלא תיראה כוו ארוך כגון פשוטה לתינוק. But if you make the roof too short, it might end up looking like a vav or like a nun sofit. ותיפסל. ולכן לא ימשוך אותה בסוף השיטה לעשותו ארוכה כלל, ואף על גב דכל האותיות אין למושכן, בלבד לא פסולה, ובכף פשוטה, אם יריך גגה עד שנראה כריש פסול. So again, sometimes what happens, the sofer, he reaches the end of the line, and he sees that he needs to fill up more space. So what does he do? He pulls out the letter, he stretches out the letter to make it longer. So generally, that's not advisable to do that, but by other letters, okay, not so critical. You can stretch out the letter a bit, make it a little bit wider to extend towards the end of the line so that you'll have your lines justified. But by a chaf, sofit, do not do that because then you're risking that it will end up looking like a reish. If we have a suffix, like again, any of these cases where the suffix is whether it looks like another letter, then we show to a tinok. Now he says, ומאוד צריך הסופר להיזהר על כל פנים לכתחילה שיהיה הירך כפליים מן הגג. In other words, לכתחילה, the length of the leg should be twice as long as the roof. Okay? כדי שאם כופפים אותה תוכל להיות כף כפופה. שאין חילוק בין כף פשוטה לכפופה, רק שזה פשוטה וזה כפופה. In other words, so that the chaf sofit, if you were to, I don't know how you would even call it, like curve it, bend it upwards, it will look like a kaf kfufa, like a regular kaf, which is only if the leg is twice as long as the roof. Then if you bend it, it will look like a kaf kfufa. Some say that even b'diavad it has to be twice as long. Here the Mishnah Berurah and the Orach Chaim argues with this opinion. He says it's not b'diavad. It doesn't have to be precise, but lechatchila it should be that way. בדיעבד, אם נמצא בספר תורה שהמשיך הגג של כף עד שנראה כריש, so if you have a ספר תורה, a chaf sofit which ends up looking like a rish, אם באפשרותו להאריך הרגל למטה, יאריך. So if you can extend the leg of the chaf sofit to make it longer, then to make sure that it will now look again like a chaf, then you should do so. But not always that's possible, because sometimes you don't have room because of the line that's below. ואם לאו ימחק הכל ויכתבנו מחדש, but if you can't have room, then you should erase the letter and rewrite it. ויש מקילין דדי בגרירת הרגל או כל הגג. In other words, some say it's enough just to erase the leg and rewrite it, or erase the roof and rewrite it. You don't have to erase the entire thing. אבל לגרור רק קצת מן הגג עד שיעמידנו על תמונת כף פשוטה לא מהנדע בלך פתוחות. But I can't just erase the longer part of the roof, which makes it look like a reish, because then that's a problem of chak tuchot. So either I erase the entire roof and rewrite it, or the entire leg and rewrite it, so that it will look correctly. Okay, גם צריך הסופר להיזהר שלא יעשה לכף פשוטה זווית למעלה. In other words, do not make it square on the upper right-hand corner. Rather, it should be curved. Okay, אלא תהיה עגולה כמו ריש, שאם כופפים אותה תעשה כף כפופה. Again, this is based on the idea that we said previously, that a chaf sofit needs to be like a chaf kfufa, just that it goes down instead of curving back, instead of bending back. So just like a chaf, we said it needs to be curved here on top, so too a chaf sofit needs to be curved on top and not squared. Okay? He says that if you make it squared on top, then it is pasul. Soon we'll see that not everybody agrees with this. So either I erase it entirely or rewrite it, or here I have another solution. Or I can add more ink in the corner here to make it curved. So to add more ink to curve it on the upper right, that you can even feed in mezuzot. Why? Because even if I don't do that, even though he holds it's pasul, nevertheless it's still readable as a chaf sofit. And we say anytime the letter is readable, there is no problem of shelok sidran. And by adding ink, there's no problem of chak tochot either, because I'm just adding ink. So that correction I could make even in tefillin ומזוזות. אך אם נמצא כן בספר תורה בעת הקריאה אין להוציא אחרת, כי יש מחסירים בזה. In other words, some have the opinion that it is fine to have the chaf sofit squared on the right, and therefore, if you're in the middle of kriyat Torah, you don't need to take another sefer Torah out. There was even a minhag to write this way lechatchila. Okay, they note this in the Sfardi Tikkun Sofrim. Here, this is a Sfardi versus an Ashkenazi, not that much of a difference, but they said, in other words, here they bring opinions that are more lenient than Mishnah Berurah and allow it even lechatchila if it's squared on the upper right.
I'm sorry, I did not catch exactly the difference between the Sephardi and Ashkenazi. It's the thickness of the leg?
It's not that much of a difference.
I don't see it. Maybe that's
there isn't that much of a difference. I don't know if there's really that much of a difference.
I mean, the Ashkenaz is straight. This one is slightly.
Yeah, it's slightly. Yeah. Again, the major question would be if you would make the upper right hand corner square. So the chatchila we don't do that.
Yeah.
The Mishnah Berurah is more machmir. He says b'diavad even it's pasul unless you're in the middle of kriyat Torah. Here there was a minhag in some Sephardi communities to lechatchila write it that way.
I see.
I think there's more basis to rely on it b'diavad if it's squared on the upper right.
Can I ask why is regarding gittin, when you write the gittin also with the letter stam,
right?
But you do not require the tagin and some of these things. What is the reason behind?
No, the tagin they write there in Ilchot Gittin, that would be like a chumra dati l'dei kula, right? If we start doing the tagin, then we might because again, according to near the Orach Chaim, you don't have to have ktav stam in ktav ashuri and a get, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the minhag. And if you would start doing tagin, then you could run into all sorts of problems. So that's why they said better not to do tagin. Although there was an opinion to say also even to do tagin in a get, but we paskin not like that.
Yeah.
And in general, all these things you don't have to be as makpid in a get, because since it doesn't really have to be ktav ashuri, so as long as it's readable, it hasn't changed the way it's read. It's kasher. It's very interesting though. A lot of if you look here at the footnotes of the Mishnah Berurah, a lot of things that he quotes, discussion letters, are actually from the Seder Aget Ma'aram, the Birkat Hamayim, because there he has very long discussions on each letter. So actually, that's one of the sources. Even though by a get it's not so critical, that's one of the sources the Mishnah Berurah uses here in his discussions of the letter. But again, if you can see most Mesadrei Gittin, they're not that lucky in Ktivat Stam.
Yeah.
Even though the sofrim might be, but they generally just try to make sure that it looks correct.
Bli Ayin Hara by us, it was really during the Ksivas Saget this past week. The Dayanim are very, very makpid and looking into miniatures. Like I had to make like high resolution pictures of some of the letters because they wanted to make sure that there is the perfection of everything is really connected, or everything is it's
What, they had a problem that something was touching?
Never really problem, but they just had to look into one of the if it's properly connected. I don't know, in a case of a mem that was put together from a kaf and a vav, and whether the connection was not too thin, was really connecting, because for the first blink of an eye you could say maybe they are separate, but we have to go with high zoom to say no, they're actually connected.
Yeah, I brought a tshuva like that in one of the source pages on Gittin, by something that you can see by a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
When you can use it, when you can't use it, yeah. But if it's actually touching, then I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Here he says something, well, it's obvious to us, but he says, כל האותיות הכפולים באלף בית. In other words, any letter that we have a letter and a letter sofit for it, כותבת הראשונים בתחילת התיבה ובאמצעה, והאחרונים בסוף התיבה ועם שינה פסול. In other words, you cannot write a regular chaf at the end of the line, and you cannot write a chaf sofit in the beginning or in the middle of a word. And if you reverse it, then it's pasul. Okay, even though you could say, well, it's a chaf either way, nevertheless, that's what he rules here. That's the Masorah of Chazal, that these letters have to be specifically different, whether beginning or middle of line versus the end, not line, word, beginning or middle of the word versus the end of the word. Okay, now Lamed. Lamed צריך להיות צווארה ארוך כו'. Okay, we'll see that he's going to say that a Lamed is basically constructed out of two letters, according to the minhag of the Ashkenazim. A Vav, okay, which is the top part of the Lamed, and a Chaf, not a full Chaf, but close to a full Chaf on the bottom part. So the top part, it needs to be like a Vav. וראשה של הצוואר יהיה עגול לצד ימין למעלה ולצד שמאל זווית לראשה כמו שהוא ראש הוו. So the top part of the Lamed, the upper right part, what you see here is curved, and the upper left part is squared, okay, like the Vav. שתמונת הלמד היא כמו כף כפופה ועליה Vav, because the Lamed is basically constructed with a kaf and on top of it a Vav. ומהי תימה יהיה ירחה עגולה מאחוריה לצד ימין, וכפופה היטב לפניה כצורת כף כפופה. So if you look at the base of the Lamed, it needs to be like a chaf, that it's curved here and then curved also on the bottom like a chaf. אך אם צריך להמשיך הקו התחתון של הכף שלה בלמד שיהיה שווה עם מקם עליון, יש דעות בזה בין הפוסקים, ויש אומרים דצריך ויש אומרים אדרבה דלא ימשיכו. Okay, in other words, the question is, does it need to be fully, the bottom part to fully reach all the way here or not to fully reach? So he brings a machloket, some say it should, like a real kaf, and some say no, you have to make it a little bit shorter, and that's the minhag. Okay, and he says v'nagu sofrim kede'azo. The minhag is to not to extend the bottom part of the lamed all the way to the end, but to sort of break it off in the middle. ולצד שמאל מקום חיבור כף עם ו' יהיה בזווית. In other words, this part, it's a picture here, where the chaf connects to the vav, this should not be curved, this should be squared. Okay. שיהיה בזווית ולא בעיגול, ויהיה חיבור הוו אל הכף בדקות, כי תמונתו כתמונת וו שעוביו מתמעט והולך לסופו כנדבר לאלה בעוד וו. In other words, where it's touching, it should be thin, because it's like a vav, which is thicker on top and becomes thinner to the bottom. So where the vav connects to the kaf in the lamed, it should be thin. לכתוב הראש והצוואר כפוף מעט על פניה. In other words, it should be slanted a little bit. Okay, not straight up, but slanted. ועל ראש הצוואר צריך להיות שני תגיד. And on top of the lamed, like you see in the pictures, we have two tagin at the end of the vav and in the middle. וכל זה הולך התחילה. לבד אם עשה צוואר הלמד כאין יוד, יש פוסלים בזה אפילו בדיעבד. He says the problem is, even if it's not a proper vav, it's kasher, as long as you don't make it too short. If you make it too short, the upper part of the lamed, instead of making it a vav, making it like a yud, very, very short, then there are opinions that say that's pasul. Now, why do sofrim want to make it shorter? They want to make it shorter because it always causes problems for them if it's extending to the upper part of the line. Okay, that's very interesting. There are tikkunim. You know, most sofrim nowadays, when they're writing a Sefer Torah or whatever it is, they're following a tikkun, which already sets up all the lines for them. So all the tikkunim, they try to account for the lamedim and the chaf sofit and the nun sofit, etc., so that it will be able to extend down without causing problems in what's below or what's above, right? Because depending, let's say you don't want a lamed under a dalid, right? Because if it ends up into the dalid, it could turn it into a hay. Okay, so all the tikkunim try to fit the lines in better ways, but everybody gets stuck at some point or another. Okay, I saw on the WhatsApp group of sofrim, they were arguing about which tikkun is the best, and he was saying this is better because it's all this, and then somebody says to him, no, it's good there, but then he gets stuck in another place. Okay, but generally that's what they're trying to avoid. Okay, here he complains on. I'll just say briefly what he's talking about here. He says, let's say I ended up writing a lamed instead of a kuf, right? So what do I need to do? I need to first erase the top part and then make the leg of the kuf. Okay, why? Because I don't want it to be chak If I'll first make the leg of the kuf into the lamed and then erase the top part, I've created the kuf by chak or the reverse. Let's say I wrote a kuf instead of a lamed. So I need to erase the leg of the kuf and add a top. So first I erase and then I write. Okay, because you always want the completion of the letter to be with writing rather than erasing. Okay, finally he says, Lamed shenitzar gabav rak in kav pashut, even if I didn't make a proper vav, just a plain line on top, like we do here, he says, yesh lachshir beshat adchak, דהיינו אם נמצא כן בשבת, אין צריך להוכיח אחרת, ובכל יתקן, אם אין לו אחרים, יניחנו בלא ברכה. So he says this is only בשעת הדחק on this type of lamed, which is just flat. RD lamed is a little different. Okay, you see the Ashkenazi one with a sort of chaf, not a full chaf, and the vav. The Sephardi one, not exactly a vav, a bit curved up on top here. And here on the bottom, doesn't go flat like a chaf, rather it comes slanted down, and then there's a sort of something here at the end. They don't have two tagim either, only one tag. Okay, let's see the mem now. So we have mem ptucha, which is a regular mem, and then we have a mem stuma, which is what we call the mem sofit. So he says, ot mem ptucha, tmunata ktsat kmo kaf vav. Okay, in other words, yeah, there's a discussion here. Some say it's a nun vav, but the Mishnah Berurah says no, it's a kaf vav. So in other words, you have this part of the mem, which is like a kaf, not exactly like a kaf, as we'll see, because a kaf is fully curved, both on the top and on the bottom. In the mem, we do it curved on the top and square on the bottom here. And then you have a vav attached to it here, a bit slanted, and on top it's touching. There is a pagam here, but it is touching, and on the bottom part it should not be touching. That's a mem ptucha mem, which is at the beginning or middle of the line. Okay, so he says, על כן תהיה לה למעלה לצד ימין עגולה, אבל למטה יהיה לה זווית. So it's not fully like a kaf, in that it's kaf like it's that it's curved on top, but in the bottom it's squared off. Below akev, but it doesn't have the akev, the heel, like the bet, which extends beyond. It just squares. It ends up square here. Okay. וגגל למעלה יהיה שווה ולא עגול. Also, the top part is only curved here on this side, on the upper right side. On the left side, it's not curved. Okay. גם גגה יהיה ארוך עד כנגד מושבה התחתון. וכל זה לכתחילה. Okay. In other words, the top part should be as long as the bottom part, but again, all of this is לכתחילה. Even if I made it squared, not curved, then it's kasher. והחרטום שבצד שמאל ייזהר לדבק אותו לגגו, ויהיה לכתחילה כמעט משוח בשווה עם הגג, רק שיהיה ביניהם לצד למעלה כמו פגם קטן. Okay? So this should be like the same height as this part, the חרטום of the vav. It should be touching here, and there's like a pagam here, a case which is not fully filled in here on the top part. יגיע עד כנגד מושב התחתון ועד בכלל. Okay, and this part should reach all the way to the bottom, so it should be parallel to the bottom part of the chaf part of the mem. Okay? והוא הדין אם הדביק החרטום למטה במקום פתיחתו למם דפסול, ומבואר לאל דינו אם לא כתב עדיין אחריו בתפילין ומזוזות. In other words, if it's touching here on the bottom, there is no space, then it's pasul, because it's now a mem stuma, And I can't even correct it, because if I just erase it, it will be chak tochot, and then I'll have to erase the full thing. So I won't be able to make this correction in filinu mezuzot, because it will be shelo kesidran. So you have to be very careful on the mem to leave the gap here in the bottom so that it won't turn into a mem stuma, what we call a mem sofit. Let's see very quickly also mem stuma. Again, a mem sofit, so this is the shape. אות מם סתומה תהיה לכתחילה עגולה למעלה לצד ימין, so it too should be curved here on the top, ולמטה יהיה לה זווית לימין ולשמאל כדי שלא תהיה נראית כסמך. But on the bottom part, it should be squared. In other words, it's squared on all sides except for the upper right. Why do I want it squared? Because that's what will distinguish it from a samech. A samech is curved and a mem sofit is squared. הפרי מגדים כתב שטוב יותר שתהיה מרובעת מכל צד, כי בכלל יכול לבוא לידי טוב. פרי מגדים said they're better to make it fully squared, even on the upper right part. ומם זאת תהיה סתומה מכל צד, וגגה היא עובר לכתחילה מעט לסתימתה מעט. In other words, here on the upper left, it shouldn't be like, it should be extending a little bit beyond, not too much, but just a little bit beyond. Okay, just like a mem ptucha has an extension, even though there it's a little different, here too the mem stuma should also have a little bit of an extension here. ולא ימשוך הגג לצד שמאלה הרבה, ובדיעבד יגרור המותר ואין בזה משום חק תוכות. Here, if I extend it too far, I am allowed to erase, and it's not חק תוכות, because even if I make it longer, it still looks like a mem stuma. It doesn't appear like any other letter. And there's no problem שלא כסדרן. אם נמצא כן בשם הקודש, אין לתקנו ויכתוב כך ושם. In other words, let's say I have the mem of the Shem Elokim, so even if I extended it quite a bit beyond, I shouldn't erase it because of the Kedushat Shem Hashem, because it's kasher as is. Let's just look now at the Sephardi. Any differences? No, nothing too. Just a bit same, just a little bit slanted differently here. Otherwise, it's pretty much like the mem. Here in the mem stuma, the Sfaradim do like the pri megadim, that they do it fully squared, as opposed to the Ashkenazim, which have it curved on the upper right. They do a full square on all sides. Both ways, it's kasher. And the main thing is not to have it end up looking like a samech, which samech, as we will learn later on, is more curved. Okay, so that's the distinguishing between a samech and a mem sofit, whether it's curved or squared. Otherwise, they're quite similar. Okay, any questions, comments? Very good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, see you next week.
Kol tov.